So I'm here to represent apparently the second best university in Ireland. I want to present some of the results from a scoping review that was recently completed, first work package for this PhD. My supervisors, one of them is here, Katie Robinson. My second supervisor is Elaine Toomey, who's based at Galway. So if we talk about the problem in clinical trials, and I think that this audience is probably very familiar with issues around outcome heterogeneity. So you may have the perfectly designed study that is measuring a primary outcome of mood score and sleep quality. And then the second study, looking at the same intervention, is going to be measuring return to work and side effects. And then, of course, third study measuring quality of life and hospitalization. So if we have these three studies looking at the same intervention, how do we compare these studies? How do we synthesize? How do we determine what are the benefits or drawbacks of taking any of these different interventions? So part of the challenge of heterogeneity is it contributes to research waste. It leads to what are essentially impossible systematic reviews, and important outcomes that might be important to people that actually have these conditions often are missed. So one of the proposed solutions to this is to develop a core outcome set. So generally, what is a core outcome set? We're talking about an agreed minimum set of outcomes that should be measured and reported in all trials on a specific condition. It's important to know that this is a minimum set, so there are always extra outcomes that can be added and measured in a trial, but this is what should be reported across all trials in a specific condition. In general, core outcome sets are developed in stages. So early on, you're going to be identifying all potential outcomes. So you might do this through a systematic review of all clinical trials in a particular area, gather all of those outcomes into a long list. This is essentially the what to measure. And then you're going to take all of those outcomes, you're going to condense them, you're going to rank them, and this is often done through interest holders. So you might be looking at clinicians in this topic area or researchers, and this is where you might also bring in some lived experience perspectives. And that leads to this agreed minimum set, which then moves on to the next stage, which is planning for how to measure. So where do people with lived experience fit into this process? So in the traditional process, early on, as I said, you're developing this long list, and it's typically gathering what is already being measured in clinical trials. And when you're condensing and ranking, you're reaching consensus among all interested stakeholders, and this might be where lived experience perspectives are typically brought in. And then your final core outcome set, it leads you to question, is this really including what matters at a minimum to everybody in this condition? So one of the problems with this is if we include people with lived experience only at the consensus or ranking stage, they're just voting potentially on what researchers or clinicians have already decided what matters across previous clinical trials. And it risks this tokenistic participation, which other speakers have spoken and touched on today. So our review focused on how to include the perspectives of people with lived experience into this early stage, this long list generation stage. So our approach was a systematic review that searched multiple databases. We had a public partner with experience in clinical trials that was involved from protocol to dissemination. We also had expert consultation with the COMET initiative, which is a group of researchers surrounding core outcome set production. And the goal was to include all papers that provided recommendations, guidance, and or insights into how to include people with lived experience. This ended up being a little bit challenging. People who work in methodology research know not everything is being spoken about in the same way. Some papers had 1 or 2 sentences of guidance included. Other papers, the entire paper was guidance. So we ended up using a qualitative content analysis process to try to distill down what are these areas of guidance. Ultimately, 45 papers were included in this review. So 4 main categories were identified, the first being people with lived experience identification, recruitment, and engagement. So this is essentially defining lived experience at the protocol, pushing for purposeful, diverse recruitment strategies, multiple touch points throughout the core outcome set process. And then the second section being data collection, multiple methods, interviews, focus group surveys, leveraging existing qualitative evidence, Analysis and reporting. A big one here was using existing reporting frameworks. They're there for people to use, so there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And then contextual considerations, which really focused around this EDI principles throughout, meaningfully engaging people. All right, okay, and that's it. I'm out of time. Thank you.